Good evening and welcome to the February 28th, 2023 Lower Frederick work session meeting. Everybody is here. Supervisor Orff is joining us on Zoom. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Township meetings are recorded for the purpose of preparing the minutes, and the recording is destroyed 6 months after the minutes are approved. This meeting will also be recorded by the teleconference provider. It is requested that all persons wishing to speak before the board shall state their name, address, and the subject matter upon which they wish to speak for the record. In the interest of facilitating the business of the board, all persons addressing the board shall be limited to 2 minutes, unless such time is extended by the chair for good cause. Individuals are requested to remain in their seats and to respect when other persons are speaking. The Board of Supervisors will provide a reasonable opportunity for citizens to comment on any non-agenda items after all agenda items have been addressed, but prior to the adjournment of the public meeting. And this board had an executive session prior to this meeting to discuss the Gentera conditional use. First item of business is the updated land development plan review for 1467 Gravel Pike. That's Lechmar Underground Cable. Who's got that? Is that you,
The
Karen?
applicant's engineer is here, and Susan, would you like to present the plan, or would you like me to walk through it?
I can do it, that's fine, sure. Susan with STA Engineering, here are the plans, and we've been working through the township approvals to get to this point. We have a recommendation to approve the waivers from the planning commission, and we also have a recommendation for preliminary final approval. So that's what we'd be seeking this evening from the board as well. The latest review letter from Value Engineering is clean, except for a couple minor plan items that need to be addressed. I can go through the individual comments. Mostly waivers. Zoning comment number 1 deals with our septic design and permitting. We're still working through that with the health department and the planning DEP. And we'll provide all that documentation once it's received. Everything is sort of slow in the pipeline of it. Number 2 is our waiver request for location of size, species, and condition of trees 6 inches in diameter or greater. We're asking for that waiver because we're not disturbing the trees along the property lines. We don't want to have to survey every individual tree if we're not disturbing it. Number 3, waiver for outer limits of tree masses and a general description of their types, sizes, and conditions. Same reason as above, we're not disturbing those trees. Number 4, principal arterials, right-of-way width, cartway, road widening along 29. We're asking for a waiver of those items. It's a state road. We have a permit from PennDOT for that driveway access. There's no need for any curb widening, sidewalk, drainage along that road. That is what it is. Number 5 is a requirement to provide an easement for stormwater or surface water that will discharge over an adjacent property. We're asking for a waiver to not get that easement or get that, because our drainage from our DMP is designed as an infiltration basin. So everything is going into the ground, nothing is going over land onto the adjacent property. So we're asking for a waiver of that item. Number 6, is a waiver from the size of the storm pipe that we're proposing in our basin. The storm pipe in the basin is a 15-inch. Your ordinance requires an 18-inch. 15 inches due to the cover and elevation and topography of the site. It's acknowledged, I just said that we're not going to have any discharge. That pipe is there just in the event of an emergency when something needs to come out of that basin if it's not draining properly. But it is expected to work properly. Number 7, sidewalks, curbs, and storm sewers along all public streets. Sorry, this one kind of tied into the one above. Again, we're asking for a waiver for those items. It's a state road. There is storm sewer along the road, and sidewalks and curbs aren't anywhere in the vicinity of this property. Number 8 talks about the private well. It's going to be used and maintained by the property owner for the pole barn, which will have a small restroom in it, and then the existing dwelling. We had a well inspection done, and the well inspection said that it was acceptable, as Carol noted, with a recommendation to add a pneumatic well tank into that well. Number 9 is just a standard financial security. Applicant will comply with that. Number 10 is a stormwater management comment saying that the stormwater management is approved, condition upon recording an operation and maintenance agreement. Number 11 is requiring that operation and maintenance agreement, and we will comply, obviously. And then the last 3 items, like I said before, are just small plan items. We have to, there's a typo on the label for the rain garden that we have to fix. Carol would like the top of grade lowered slightly, which we can do and will comply. And we have a plan of the sanitary sewer design, and it was done by a separate company. We just have to align our lines on our plan with what they designed. So we will do that. That's everything. We had a Montgomery County Planning Commission review, as Carol noted. As I noted, we're still waiting for that permit from the Montgomery County Health Department who was submitted. And the DEP sewage planning, we're working on that as well. And we have our permit from PennDOT.
I assume are you finished there?
Yes.
I think it's Susan?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Dan Orff, Supervisor Orff. And I guess this is a question for Carol. With respect to items 2 and 3, where it's being waived as a requirement, is that, what's the specifics under which that's being waived?
Supervisor Orff, this is Carol. So the applicant, as she stated, is not disturbing those trees, and therefore is asking for a waiver of the requirement to send somebody out there to identify and label each and every tree and species, or generally describe the tree masses that go up along the edges of the property. So
Okay, so the plan has, yeah, I just wanted to check. So the plan that they have actually has identified the precise location that the building is going to be positioned and how far away it is from all the tree masses that are there. Is that the idea?
yes, and the trees that are internal to the property, they are working around. There's actually some tree protection fencing to protect one of them. So I don't offer any objection to their request for the waiver on items 2 and 3.
Okay, without, yeah, I don't have the advantage of the plan in front of me, so I have to, I'll take your word for it. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I have some if you want to go first.
Was that me go first?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
sorry.
go.
So Carol, so for items 1 and 8, am I understanding that the septic and the well are both shared between the house and the business pole barn?
That is exactly how it's represented.
Okay, and are they going to be, or are they separating the lots? Is it gonna be two separate?
No, this is all
one lot?
one parcel.
And that's allowed,
Yeah,
okay,
based on the zoning variance they received.
okay. If they were to separate them two different parcels, then that would not be allowed, is that the way I understand this?
That would be correct. They'd
Okay.
have to come back to you for a subdivision, and they'd have to make sure that the water and sewer service was separated as well.
Okay, thank you.
You done?
Yep.
Chuck Yeiser. With regard to, oh, I had the review letter here, got too many papers. Item 5 in the review letter, which talks about easements, that you've requested a waiver for an easement. And I understand, I remember seeing your plan, I was sitting in the audience at Planning Commission. But I mean, I guess I look at it as, yeah, it's an infiltration basin, but things happen and water goes places where we don't intend it to. And what is the trouble with you providing that easement? It doesn't sound like that's a huge ask for us, from us, I should say, to ask for that easement, unless I missed part of the conversation. I thought, you know, it was a good sort of fallback in case that infiltration basin has some issues at some point.
Yes, and we did attempt to obtain that easement in order to implement it.
Okay. So that's something you need from an adjoining property owner, is that it?
Downstream property owner, yes.
Okay.
This is, no, yeah, just supervisor work. I can't really see the other supervisors, so hopefully I'm not stepping on top of somebody. With respect to item number 7, sidewalks, curbs, and storm sewers, and this goes to Carol again, and then she, I guess, does the adjoining commercial properties to the left of this, as you look at this property, what would be to your immediate right, I'm sorry, do they have, I thought they had existing curbs there and so forth. Am I mistaken?
I'm looking right now, Supervisor.
And if they do, why would, go ahead.
Can I explain why curbs wouldn't be a good idea on this road in this location? The drainage from gravel pipe drains into this property and runs in a swale along the frontage of the property that goes down into the culvert that's below on the downstream side of the property. So if you were to put curb on there, then you'd have to move all the storm sewer that's already in place and it's swaled along the state road up into where the curb is. So right now, the drainage is working properly because it's coming off the road, getting into the roadside swale, into the piping and inlets that are in that roadside swale, and being directed down into the culvert.
So you're trying to avoid it from getting to the stream, which is at the far right of your property? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, that's exactly where it's trying to go.
Is that a good idea to direct all the water into the stream as opposed to have it percolate through your property? Carol, can you explain that to me? Because
Yeah, and it's a little hard without a plan in front of us, but let me try.
okay,
First, I'm going to take a step back and answer your previous question. The lot,
Okay.
upslope of this lot, the curbing on that lot is all interior to the property, but along Route 29, it is not curved.
Okay.
The lot that is before you tonight as Ms. Rice represented, flows off of Route 29 into a swale parallel to 29, and it is captured by storm sewer inlets, by PennDOT storm sewer inlets along 29, and conveyed down to the stream, the bottom of the hill there.
Okay.
There's then a high point on, so then it goes up again and then back, then slopes back down. So the front of the property does not drain to the back of the property. The very front of the property, the right-of-way drains in that swale, in that PennDOT storm sewer towards the stream. The back of the property drains toward the back of the property, and that is what we're discussing. The majority of the development, the majority of that that's being improved is being captured by the stormwater infiltration basin. Does that help?
Okay.
Does
That helps, yeah, because, okay, so that makes sense to me. So there is the potential if that infiltration basin were to fail, like, or not fail, or be overrun by one of these 100-year storms, which have happened each of the last 2 years. If it overran that, it would also go into that same stream. So I'm just a little concerned that, you know, about that stream, because that the neighbors of that stream have already registered some serious concern about whether that stream can handle, once you put that impervious surface there, and some of the other issues there. So just wanted your opinion on that. So if you would.
My opinion, sure, I'd be happy to. What the designer, the engineer and other professionals that are involved in this project provided soil testing information, and the soil tests were actually observed by a soil scientist from my office. And they found that when they got below a certain elevation, they had really good infiltration rates. I think it was 4 or 5 feet. It was a little bit of depth.
Yes.
So when they dug far enough, the soil infiltration was super, better than we usually find in this township, frankly. And so, right now, all of this property, front and back, ultimately drains some way, somehow to that creek. What the designer here has proposed is to capture all the runoff from the areas being improved, the parking lot, the building, the lawn right above it, to capture all of that and put it into this basin and infiltrate it in the 1 through 100-year storms. And because we asked them to go a little bit deeper, to make sure that they intersect this layer that infiltrates so well, there's actually some safety factor in this. So the design very completely captures up to and including the 100-year storm, without any discharge designed from the pipe of the basin. It's designed to all infiltrate down into the ground. So all that lawn area goes to the stream today, but all that would be captured by this design tomorrow. Is that a reasonable explanation?
All right. That's thank you very much. That's very clear, and actually, so it sounds like ostensibly it'll be slightly better off than the current scenario if everything works per plan, right?
That's exactly correct. If everything works towards by plan, less water will go to that stream by overland flow tomorrow than does before any work happens on that property.
Okay. Thank you very much for the clarification, Carol. Appreciate it.
You have any questions, Taylor?
No, I don't. There was enough answered there. I understand what they,
Okay.
I have one follow-up.
Go ahead.
So I'll just go back to item 5 with the easement, and our solicitor can chime in perhaps too and answer. So you had some interaction with the neighbor and you asked for the easement and they declined, I assume, right? Is that, do you have that in a written form or is this a verbal thing that happened?
In an email.
I mean, should we be asking as a condition here to have that memorialized as a written correspondence and at least is that something that is done from time to time or
We certainly could, yes.
is that appropriate thing to do? I don't know what we've done in the past, so.
I mean, we've done similar things in the past, most recently with Prestige, and right-of-way or easements along Little Road for a trail, asking the neighbors. We wanted something in writing showing the neighbors that, no, we don't want to give land for the easements. So we have asked for these sorts of confirmation from third parties in the past.
What does everybody else think?
I think that sounds fair. You willing to supply that?
Seems reasonable to me, Chuck, and I agree with you, Chuck.
I do have an email chain from the property owner that basically said he was uncomfortable with providing a letter, and our attorney reached out to him regarding an easement, has not heard back.
So what you're saying is he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes.
I could say that, yeah.
And you're construing that to be a no.
Yes.
Okay.
But I also think, my understanding of the situation was originally he seemed agreeable and then pulled back from that. So I think that's the reason why it's interpreted as a yes because, or as a no, because originally they had a yes and then it became this answer.
I don't know how that's typically handled in this situation.
Well, I mean, it is something we don't have, it's a third party, we have no control over. The applicant has no control over it, which is why they're asking for the waiver. And, you know, it's the applicant who's at risk here,
Right.
not getting this easement, not the township.
Technically, the easement is required if we are sending overland flow from our development onto their property, and we did say that we'll be infiltrating. So.
I mean, is it sufficient just to ask that the email chain be part of their package?
Yes, I'm fine with that, yeah.
Just in case it ever becomes an issue, it's been asked and, you know.
Yeah, sounds good.
And my assumption is that we will be voting on this at our meeting next week.
That would be my recommendation. Based on this discussion, I will prepare an approval resolution, and then that can be reviewed and voted on next week.
Great, thank you.
You have
Any questions from the public now?
Ron? Yep, go ahead, Ron.
On Kerwin, 147.
Sorry, do you mind coming up because the people on Zoom can't hear you?
I have two. One really concerns Dan next door about the waiver of an easement. So he doesn't agree with allowing an easement on the property for this, I guess, pipe or something in case it fails or whatever. So what they're asking for is to eliminate his say. Doesn't seem right.
No.
I'm just looking for documentation that a recommendation by our engineer was followed up on. That's all I'm concerned about, that, you know, it was something that was asked about and the applicant in good faith followed up on it. That's all I'm looking for.
I understand that, but they're asking for a waiver of that easement since he doesn't want to grant it. That doesn't seem quite right.
That's a misinterpretation of why the easement's required and what's going on here. The easement is asked for because under common law in Pennsylvania, if you change how the flow comes off your property onto your neighbor's property, and that flow causes damage to your neighbor's property, the neighbor may have a claim against you. So what most places, municipalities require is they say, we want you to get an easement from your neighbor. That way you don't have to worry, you, the applicant, don't have to worry about being sued if this ever causes damage to you. So that's why we have this requirement in our ordinance. The neighbor has refused to do this, and so now it's on the applicant. The applicant could say, okay, we're not gonna risk this, we're gonna just drop the application. Or in this case, the applicant is like, I don't think water's ever gonna go on the neighbor's property, so I don't think the easement's needed. I'm not putting myself at risk. So that's why they are saying we want a waiver to this easement requirement. It's a requirement that protects the applicant. That's really what it does. It has nothing to do with the township or any approvals. And the neighbor, by refusing to do this, he's just leaving his options open that if damage happens to his property from this development in the future, he has the ability to sue if he wishes.
So,
The other question I had was, I understand the health permit for the laboratory in the pole barn is not approved yet, or not cleared out yet. When does that happen? If they're gonna approve this next week, and they don't have it yet. how
Yeah,
does-
we cannot hold up, under state law, we can't hold up our approvals because some other entity is not giving their approvals. So what would happen is this approval, if the board grants it next week, it would be conditioned upon them getting that health department
That would
permit.
still be a condition.
It would still be a
Yes.
condition. And, that might be a condition, either they wouldn't be able to record the plan before getting it, or they wouldn't be able to pull a building permit before getting it.
Okay, so there'd be something in advance. Okay,
Yes.
that was my concern, that it never happened, and it goes up and then we go.
right,
No,
Okay.
I think a lot of that's pretty much boilerplate in all these things.
Right.
Yeah.
yes,
I kinda figured.
generally, yes.
The way things are going, I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one more thing.
Go ahead.
Dan Sullivan, 218 Colonial. I have the email I sent to the attorney too, if you guys want that, stating my position on the easement.
Peter, do you want it?
Actually, I'll ask, Susan, if you can ask the attorney to get it. It should come through the applicant, not
Okay.
through, yeah.
Great.
Thank you for the offer. Phil?
Phil Smith, 205 Gerlach Road. I think, I certainly support the idea of a waiver of sidewalking at this time for the applicant, but I think it would be prudent for the board to request a plan note be placed that at a future point, we would, as a township, want to entertain the possibility of sidewalking at that location. Be of no encumbrance at this time from your land development, but would ensure that there's some kind of documentation that if in a commercial district we ever needed to sidewalk, we'd have at least a reference to the previous land development. Thank you.
Can I do a follow-up on what Phil just said?
Hang on. Any comments on that, or we'll just take it under
I
consideration?
mean, we have done that in the past.
No.
A little bit further toward the circle for, I think it was Libsey. And it just is basically looking into the future and not closing any doors. So I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yep, I'm fine with that, Terry.
Is it, kind of, is it
Sounds reasonable to me.
just a note on the plan saying sidewalks could be here in the future? Or are we taking additional?
I'm gonna ask
easement, or
her.
Are we taking money?
I think what we've done in the past is put a note on the plan that says the township can require the property owner to install sidewalks in the future. I don't believe, I think we did take an escrow on one property once, and the escrow expired before.
Okay, so, okay.
So we're looking for the potential opportunity to install sidewalks in the future. Anyone else before you go again? All right, go ahead, Ron.
Going to what Phil had mentioned, we did that before. I'm glad you said that. I forgot all about that. We did it all along where the landscaper is across from the deer place. They wanted stuff in, and in fact, I think I'd recommend if we don't do it now, it doesn't need to, it's a landscaping place. But in the future, we would reserve the right to do it. Sidewalks, curbing, landscaping, and so forth. So I doubt it would ever reach this area, but it's certainly prudent for the township to reserve the right. So I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Do you need anything else from us, Peter, on this?
No, this is good, thank you.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda, Omnibus Ordinance Zoning Amendment Part 2. We received this updated draft yesterday.
Yeah, I guess so.
Are we ready to discuss it?
Okay.
Can we start? I have a question. I have many questions. I'm going to start with this one. The Planning Commission's recommendation was quite detailed, but in one section, I'm looking for it now, they talked about, oh, here it is, motion number one, for consistency and proper alignment, the Planning Commission again recommends that the R2 neighborhood lighting option be removed from the township zoning code except within the defined 1/4 mile area adjoining the township's designated future growth area. And I don't think that was reflected in the current draft, and if it was, I must have missed it.
No, it's not.
No.
The current draft has not been changed to address these comments from the planning commission.
Oh, it is not, okay.
No,
Okay,
it
so
has not.
should we maybe start?
I didn't want to spend the time doing that until I understood where the board wanted to go.
Okay. Oh, can we start with that then?
You want to start there, or you want to just?
Yeah, with respect to that item. Oh, sorry, Chuck, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, do we want to start with the more straightforward topic, which is talking about building lot size and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just put a pin in that.
Does that make sense?
Yep, go ahead.
So at their last meeting, my understanding is the planning commission clarified their recommendation for the R1 zoning district for neighborhood lotting to increase the minimum lot size from 10,000 square feet to 12,500 square feet. The minimum buildable area for each lot, it says here from 10,000 square feet to 12,500 square feet. Is that correct, Carol? The maximum building coverage for each lot to reduce it from 25 to 18. So currently it's at 18. The draft ordinance had increased it to 25. So basically what the Planning Commission is recommending is that it stay at 18%.
Correct.
The maximum impervious surface coverage, so this is a new one that we've never had in our codes, right? So that, the draft code had 40%, and the Planning Commission recommended a reduction to 33%. Similarly, for the R2, there was an increase in the minimum buildable area for each lot from 10,000 square feet to 12,500. Again, the prior meetings changes had recommended going from the minimum lot size from 10,000 square feet to 12,500 square feet. That's not bulletized in here because that was something they did back in January. All right, these are the recommendations that they just did in February, so they didn't repeat the January one. And then the maximum building coverage, again, the draft ordinance had it at 25%, and the planning commission recommended at keeping it at the current value of 18%. And similar to the R1 that I talked about, the maximum impervious surface coverage, the draft ordinance had it at 40%, and again, this is a new thing, and the planning commission recommended reducing that to 33%.
Chuck, yeah, Chuck, those are the numbers I recall from the planning commission meeting as well. Supervisor Worf here.
Yeah, just a comment, if the recommendation, and if we agree with it, to remove the neighborhood lotting option from R1, then the other items I don't think are applicable.
No, there's no recommendation to remove it completely from R1.
Yeah,
It's to reduce,
that,
No, it says,
I don't know what it says, but I know what was talked about and what was voted on. They want to
Yeah.
reduce only have neighborhood lotting option available within this quarter-mile boundary that surrounds the future growth area.
right.
Yeah. Which is what our regional plan
yeah,
has
and,
stated.
yeah,
Almost
sorry,
2
Chuck, I
decades.
didn't mean to step on you. And they were pretty specific that the neighborhood lotting, all the houses associated with that neighborhood lotting were to occur within, for that development, had to occur within that 1/4 mile. So you couldn't have like one house of the neighborhood at the edge of the 1/4 mile and the rest on the other side. So they had to exist within the 1/4 mile framework. At least that's my understanding of what they were saying. And I thought it was prudent, or decent compromise they came up with. Is that how you understood it, Chuck, or?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So before us now is if this board agrees with these recommendations, which is number one, to remove neighborhood lotting except within the 1/4 mile. And secondly, to have the impervious surface at 33% as opposed to the proposed 40%, and have the building coverage remain at 18% rather than increasing it to 25%. And I guess also increasing the minimum lot size from its current 10,000 square feet to 12,500 square feet.
And the building, and the buildable area too, because the buildable area, they want that at 12,500 as well. That means if you take away a lot of steeps and a lot of wetlands, you still have to have 12,500 square feet of buildable land.
Right, that would be the minimum lot size.
But slightly different. It's minimum buildable area. There's two provisions. Minimum lot size. Let's say the whole thing was buildable. That has to be 12,500 square feet. But your minimum buildable area also has to be 12,500 square feet. I mean, yeah. So they're two slightly different things. But maybe Carol, if you want to chime in, you can explain the difference better than I did, maybe.
Dan, I think you can explain the difference just fine. It's the
Okay.
action of the fact that your zoning ordinance says that these neighborhood lots can't have any environmental features like steep slopes or floodplain, and that's the reason that your buildable area needs to be the same as your lot area.
Thank you, Karen.
So with regard to the quarter mile. So that has been in our, that has been part of our regional planning since 2005, it's almost 2 decades. And I'd like to give a little bit of background that maybe would help put our current zoning in context. So this is a few sheets from a 1971 comprehensive plan that the township participated in. And at the time, based on, they did several different calculations, arithmetic projections, geometric projections, all these different projections. There are numbers in this plan that was done in 1971 of us having 10,000 residents, 15,000. There's a number here that's over 15,000 residents. In 1990, we had 3396, based on the census data that's in some of these reports. So we're going to assume that's accurate, because that's in a few different places. So that's 1971. We anticipated huge growth. In 1995, when we did an open space plan, or I wasn't involved in the township at the time, but when those people did it, they projected by 2020 that we would have, our population would be 5,150, so 5,150. We got pretty close. Then when 2006 came around and we redid our plan, we looked back at the whole decade of the 1990s and saw that our population actually swelled from 3,396 to 4,795. So it was a lot more than, it was a big jump. That's, I think it's, I forget the exact number, the percentage increase was like maybe 40% or something like that. So then the 2006 plan, you know, is basically now projecting in 2020 a population of 7,450. 2025, a population of 8,490. And then when we did our comp plan just a couple years ago, we kind of looked at it all and you could see where we were going. And again, we're right just a little below 5,000 unless something's happening I'm not sure of. So I think our zoning that was adopted in the late 2000s, early 2000s, late 1990s, which is a zoning we kind of been living with, you know, was still in that period, but we had that huge growth spurt in the 1990s, but now we're not seeing that. And one of the conclusions of the comp plan is, hey, we have adequate capacity in this township and we can afford to basically modify our zoning. And by all intents, I mean, that's essentially what was agreed to when we came into the regional planning process in the early 2005. So I see this as just, you know, looking at what the projections were. I can understand why there was this big notion of having, you know, R1 and neighborhood lotting all over the place. But then when you actually look what's happening, and that's, you know, one of the things we did in the comp plan, and there was a lot of discussion on that topic, if you remember, when we went through that planning process. We saw that, you know, we're not getting that growth. And more importantly, from what I have seen over the years, in the areas that are further from our core, which is here, where we don't have infrastructure, the R1 zoning, the way we have it now, I don't see how any developer is going to want to put in infrastructure with the number of homes they're going to be getting, right? Because we're pretty, you know, pretty restrictive out there. So their number of homes they're going to get on a big parcel is not going to be enough to justify them installing the infrastructure. And we've seen that over and over again. You know, they come in and they're like, well, we'll do this. We want double the number of homes that the ordinance provides for. So I just, you know, looking at it time and time again, I don't see how developing further out is necessarily getting us anywhere, in the sense that, you know, how are we going to build that infrastructure and who's going to pay for that? You know, go back and look at the 537 plan and, you know, what would it have cost those people had failing septic systems. If we installed all of that, you know, the numbers in there, on top of the tap-in fee, the $74.50, on top of their plumbing costs, I think those costs were about another $20,000 because the developer wants to recapture their investment. So you have to look at it, in my mind at least, I've looked at this any way but sideways, I mean, every way, including sideways, I just don't see it working out. And to me, logically, it makes sense to go back to, you know, what we've had on the books in terms of our agreement with the other municipalities in our joint planning process for almost 20 years. So that's, you know, that's where my thought process has gone. Hopefully I didn't rant too much, but that's what I get out of all this.
So if I can summarize what you said and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing it, you agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation to eliminate neighborhood lotting in the R1 and stick to the quarter mile per our regional plan.
With the exception of what you said, eliminate in the R1. We're not eliminating, we're allowing it in a portion of the R1, just not the whole.
Eliminating it everywhere except within the quarter mile.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Would you care to comment on the other?
Yeah, we'll just,
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
yeah, I was just gonna say, we'll just need to be very careful how, I mean, we'll have to look to Peter's guidance on how we make that wording careful, cautious on how we word that, because I think there's a number of citizens who believe the wording already indicated that that restriction was already in place, and we're a bit dismayed that it was interpreted by external counsel that that's not how it was. So we'll look to Peter to give us the right wording so that it means that all the houses related to neighborhood lotting that would occur within that quarter mile of the, the growth area, occurs within that quarter mile of the growth area. So, Peter, that's something we can write, right?
Yes.
And I think it would be
Okay,
useful to
thank you.
finally to be consistent with our regional plan, which is very important. Thoughts on the increase of the minimum lot size from 10,000 to 12,500 square feet?
I think it was reasonable what they did, and making it consistent between R1 and R2 seemed like a logical decision on their part.
Yeah, I would agree with everything laid out by the Planning Commission and appreciate them for clarifying at the last meeting, and look forward to aligning what we have in our ordinance with what the regional plan says.
Yeah, I'd like to address the building coverage. I know we've talked about this quite a while last year, and our concern was that the 18% was not sufficient to put all the things on a piece of property that a property owner would want, and that was the reason for increasing it. Anyone else?
With the increase in the lot size, the increase in the building coverage, I think would work just increasing it 2% to 20. Because that would get us
Yep.
the same amount of impervious surface as the ordinance originally was suggesting with a 10,000 square foot lot size.
Okay, so thoughts on increasing it? I'm fine with increasing it from 18 to 20%.
And that also, if you remember, Carol put out a chart of a bunch of similar zoning districts and requirements. If you look at that, I mean, they're all over the place, but generally for a 10,000 square foot lot, I think most places had a 20% building coverage. There were some with a little less, there were some with more, but I think 20% was probably a good median or average.
Thoughts from the board?
Can you just repeat the reason, the 20%, you said something like is equivalent, I'm
Well,
following.
the ordinance originally suggested 25% building coverage on a 10,000 square foot lot, which would
Okay.
result in 2,500 square feet of building coverage with a 1250 minimum lot size, and 20% you get the same 2,500.
Got it, all right, sorry.
What do you think, Terry? Increase from 18 to 20?
Yes, without a doubt.
Others?
If that's how the math works, that's how the math works. I don't have any issues with it, Supervisor Orr.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, in both R1 and 2, to keep it consistent.
Yeah, I think, yeah, keep it consistent.
Yeah, fine.
Peter, you have any opinions about the building coverage?
That
Got your
was buil-
calculator?
That was building.
That was building coverage.
I'm sorry, I mean impervious surface.
Yeah, I think 33 works. If, once again, looking at Carol's chart, I think 35 is a lot more areas have 35, and that might, I think, once again, probably would be a good number to settle upon, but I think 33 would still work for us.
I'll chime in here, this is Carol. When we did the original analysis, we talked about the fact that we were seeing 10 to 15% higher impervious percentage over building coverage percentage in the analysis that we did. That 10% would be the minimum, but with 15% that would reduce the likelihood that somebody has to go to a zoning hearing for impervious coverage. So my suggestion, and the planning commission seemed on board with this, was to make the impervious coverage 15% more than the building coverage. So if you're going from 18 to 20, I would suggest to follow course and go from 33 to 35 for consistency.
I knew you got the 33 somehow before, I couldn't remember it. Thanks.
She did try to stay off it, because it's, you know, I think she started at 35 or 30. So 33 is what-
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Any other comments? Is everyone okay with that, keeping it 15% higher?
Yeah, that's the last of the math we're going to do tonight, I hope.
Can't promise.
But that's fine.
Anyone else? Terry, Chuck, Terry?
I'm good with it, yeah.
You're all okay with that? All right. I have something for, I don't know if this is Peter or Carol, but in the Montgomery County review, they suggested that we encourage the use of individual on-lot systems. And this is a quote apparently from Upper Salford. It says, individual systems are preferred. If community or central systems are proposed, the applicant shall be obligated to provide an alternative analysis to establish that the maximum density as calculated cannot be attained utilizing individual on-lot systems. Under no circumstances shall a community system or central system be permitted where individual on-lot systems can be utilized. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about this, and I know, Peter, you were quite vocal about the risk of having community systems. Is this kind of language something we could incorporate to basically say, look, you've got to do an on-lot system first, and the only way you can have a community system is if you can't do an on-lot, and you have to prove it?
You know, it seems to me counterintuitive to allow cluster zoning, to allow a 12,500 square foot lot, and then say, well, we want you to look at.
No, this would be just in the R1, I'm assuming.
For the R1 for regular lotting, not neighborhood lotting?
Yep.
Then yeah, we certainly, you know, you certainly could have language like that. I have townships where we have actually a list that you have to go down to. And the first one on that list where it works, that's what you have to put in.
Mhm.
And, you know, community systems, public systems are at the very bottom. To try to, once again, to maintain on-lot systems, to maintain groundwater, and to try to limit the intrusion of development and community systems in those areas. So, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
sorry I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah.
But I
I'm fine
I
with
do
that.
remember we talked about this several times, and I think just to ensure that under all circumstances, on-lot systems would be the preferable option in the R1,
Mhm.
where there is no neighborhood lotting.
Say that again?
I said, in the R1 where there is no neighborhood lotting.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Any,
And to be honest, I think you'd also want that in the R2 for someone who's not choosing neighborhood lotting.
Yeah.
Because the R2 minimum is still an acre, correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 acre. So that might be a little tight, especially if you have a well, but that's certainly doable. But yeah, for both of those, you probably would want that, yes.
Okay, any comments from the board on that suggestion?
That seems fine. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
Okay.
no comment.
okay. Dan?
Seems like a good suggestion. Marla.
Marla?
So this is currently in Upper Salford's code, is that it?
Apparently, yeah, this is it was in the county's review
Yeah.
letter.
Mhm.
Are there any other items we want to discuss on this today? Do we want to finish going through this, or just give it a start? Sorry, we're going to finish our board discussion first before we get to the public, Bob.
I wanted to go back to the one that you just were talking about.
No, but
Saying
we're
gonna wait till the end.
going to finish our discussion, so you could just hold on to that.
I think that's enough to get Peter started.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do more to get Peter started on this.
I do have one question, I don't know the history here. But what is the purpose of this quarter acre boundary outside of the R2? Or, sorry, quarter acre. I mean, where is it shown that, you know, this is something we should consider rather than just saying, we're gonna only have neighborhood lotting in the R2 and not have it all in the R1?
The regional plan.
It has to do with, go ahead, Chuck, I'm sorry.
The regional plan looks at that area as a transitional zone from our future growth area where we expect to have development and encourage development to the rural surrounding area. So that was the purpose of it. You know, if you were to talk to any of the planners, that's what they're gonna tell you.
Okay.
Would it be useful for you to have a copy of the regional plan to see how that's worded?
No, that's a perfect answer.
Okay,
And so I might, based on that answer, I might add additional tweaks to this transition zone to make it more of a transition zone than an extension of the R2.
okay, that makes sense. So from what I understand, the board has addressed this portion of the omnibus ordinance part 2, and do you want to address the rest of it at our work session next month? Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anything else from the board on this? Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the previous one. When, with the 12,500 square feet, at the 18%, I think when you were saying to allow homeowners to have the additional things that they want, I believe Carol already put into her calculations that the decks are now removed from that calculation, correct? Did you speak of that before, that the deck coverage comes out of that?
Decks have been removed from building coverage by the ordinance revision compared to the civil standards.
Right, so, you know, obviously, if you weren't taking that into consideration, Marla, when you made your statement, that's already been removed, as you said, so, you know, the planning commission worked very hard to get all these numbers, and with the 18 and the 33%, and then, you know, Peter talks about the chart that Carol had put up, and there was some discussion at that point in time as well, that the chart that Carol did do does show that representation, but the representation between what was on that chart and what actually is equal to R1 and R2 were either older developments that are no longer being done in those townships at that size. So I just wanted to bring it up to you so that you're aware of it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Warren.
Are there any reasons that having 20% rather than 18% building coverage would benefit the people who live in this township? I know that it benefits developers to have a larger lot size, but is there any way that that is meaningful for the people who actually live here?
It allows them to have a greater variety and choice in housing styles. Probably the biggest issue in having a parent who was basically confined to a wheelchair is if you have a larger building coverage area, developers are more likely to build single level homes. You do not see a lot of ranch homes built in developments these days, and that's one of the reasons why is because of limits on building coverage and limits on impervious surface. So, yes, there is a sweet spot here. You don't want to do it so tight that you get either no homes or very poor homes or just, the same home over and over and over again, because that's the only thing that works. And then, likewise, you don't want to make it so big that you basically have, an urbanized environment with no yards around these homes. I think it's been my and Carol's recommendation that that sweet spot is a little above 18%. But ultimately, it's the board that needs to make this decision. And I don't, they've directed me to write this, but I don't think they've made a final decision as of yet.
Courtney, did I see your hand up? No? Phil, go ahead.
Just to help Peter understand that transition between our dense areas and our future growth areas, there's a difference in the requirements for open space preservation. So in R1, for instance, yeah, you'd be able to neighborhood lot it within a quarter mile, but you would also have to create the open space at 75% as opposed to 55 in the R2. So that has to be understood. I think that is part of the process here that we need to be acknowledging that as well.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ernie.
Ernie Schmidt, 209 Silverbrook Drive. I know I'm new on the planning commission. I'd served previously, and then I've been there as an alternate. And a lot of times I'm starting fresh, so I was at my first meeting, and it's hard to be subjective when you've been at meetings as an alternative person to be there, or as an alternate. And it seems to be a little bit confusing, and I am confused, even though I voted for this to be moved ahead to the Board of Supervisors, only because I had raised a question before about this quarter-mile buffer, and it has no real demarcation other than it's shown on a line on the preliminary plan that we have. I'm confused. Who else in this great area of Pennsylvania, other municipalities, have a separation between districts and without any explanation as the quarter mile and don't show any meets and bounds? How do you do this? Has anybody else tried this before? Is this a seat of a pants? I don't know what we're trying to do. I know I was on other planning things in the township. I never remembered anybody bringing up that they're going to separate things by a quarter of a mile. It's strange to me. I don't understand it. Teach me. You should come out with a map, even though I know the township pretty good. I can't tell where you could do things, but it would be nice to show this quarter mile and how it goes through the zigs and zags. I had said at a previous meeting, about Lewis and Clark. This almost seems like somebody would have to go out here and survey this whole thing.
Right.
And somebody's gonna have to contest it. And again, I don't know of any ground that would be a contestable factor that somebody would come here as a developer and try to test the waters. I'm just asking a stupid question, I guess.
I don't know if I can completely answer your question, but I will say that the Central Perkiomen Valley Regional Planning Commission, which we're trying to become consistent with, is updating their regional plan this year and next year. So I would hazard a educated guess that drawing a new zoning map for the region will be part of that process. So hopefully we'll have a little more clarity at the end of that.
The only question I have about that, you have to remember, in part of your regional plan, guess what? You've got 3 boroughs. They've got no place to go. Collegeville and Trapper build out, Schwanksville's about built out too, I believe, and might have a little bit. What is their influence? 3 boroughs who got their right to be there by annexation in the past from future townships. They have the right to determine what we're going to get and put it on a master plan when anything they can't do gets shifted to us. It goes to Perkiomen Township, Lower Frederick Township, and Upper Frederick Township. Why do they have the right to tell us what we're going to do? They don't. They're all built out.
I'm not going to argue with you, Ernie. That's not an accurate characterization.
This quarter-mile line.
Well, I know when this was discussed at Planning Commission, they did talk about how to establish the boundary, and I think that's what you're asking, right? Whether or not, once we start looking at it in more detail, we say, gee, maybe it should be really defined by parcel boundaries as opposed to some
That's right.
imaginary
Should be.
line.
That's the way our zoning's currently done now.
Right. And I mean, that is part of the juggernaut in all this, is to how to do it. Do it in a way that's not, we're not debating it all the time when something comes in, a plan comes in. And I think probably the best way is to see, to take the line, and maybe that's the thing that our planner should do, right? That's what he's there for, to do these kinds of things, is to say, okay, if we draw this quarter mile, what parcels are in and what parcels are out, and see how that looks, and then start to make some educated decisions about how to do it.
I think you should. That's just mine, I'm only one vote.
Is that something that you've seen before, Peter? I mean, as opposed to just saying something nebulous about a quarter mile.
Yeah, I've seen both, and, to answer Ernie's original question, I have seen overlays, I have seen special zoning districts. It is a common practice in zoning to try to do sort of transition districts. Generally speaking, in an idealized township, you would have your highest density, your most concentrated uses, i.e. industrial uses, and then next to that you would have commercial uses, next to that you would have high density residential, mid-density residential, and then low density residential, that sort of gradient. So it's very common to have, to try to do transitional neighborhood, zoning, transitional neighborhoods where you might have commercial districts, and then you'll go to a district that is multifamily, higher density, to kind of buffer the commercial from the single-family larger lot districts. And so, yeah, I haven't seen something exactly like this before, but I have seen situations that are very similar. And as far as plotting out this line, I have seen, it described where it is just a line that does not follow property boundary, does not follow roads, does not follow natural features, just a line. And then I have seen it where it follows roads, where it follows natural features, where it makes sure it doesn't split zone a piece of property. You can do it both ways. Either way has advantages or disadvantages.
Well, I mean, the split zoning is precisely what happened with Melbourne Hill when it came in originally.
Right.
And the township wasn't even aware of it until the developer pointed it out and said, hey, I can get extra because part of my parcel's in a higher, zone for higher density.
Yes.
So while you mentioned it, just, I'll just read quickly, this is what the regional plan says about this transition. It's on page 110. It just says, with the intent of and it's under the rural resource conservation area, which a large part of our township is in. It says, with the intent of allowing for a transition area to occur between the growth and no growth areas, rural cluster developments occurring on tracts that are located entirely within a quarter mile of a growth boundary may connect to public sewer, provided the development is connected to public water and provides a minimum of 60% open space. Says this will allow for the visual appearance of a denser development while still only being permitted to build at a density of 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. So, again, it's a transition.
Okay, so we will get some updates to this and continue this discussion at our next work session to try and get through the rest of the omnibus part 2. The next topic is a request from the roadmaster regarding the Colonial Park fill.
Okay, so this should be an easy one.
Good.
Tommy, we've gotten requests, I think, over time regarding the fill tile. So he's requesting authorization that we would allow residents to take from the fill pile with no use of township equipment. They would need to pick it up and haul. We're not involved in that process. I did put on, talking about spreading the fill over the park, as Carol pointed out, or kind of reminded me, that ship sailed when our MPDS permit, like I said, did it expire or just terminated?
Yeah.
So that's out of play. I think obviously that pile's just going to continue to grow, as we've talked about previously. So we would just be looking for authorization to allow that. And I don't know, is there anything?
We want, whoever is using it, whoever uses this, we want them to sign a document, basically like a hold harmless indemnification, so that if they injure themselves on our property moving our dirt, they don't decide to sue us.
Yeah, this is Supervisor Worf. I actually think this is a bit more complicated than it's being made out to be. Who's going to, let's say, we get approached by 25 residents. How do we judge who comes when? This could turn into a rather complicated process. We talked about this, I forget when, but this was discussed by the board previously, and it was decided that there were too many potential pitfalls with going this direction. I don't know if the other board members remember when we talked about this, but there were certain issues related to this. Although it seems simple on face, once you get into it, it gets pretty complex. I don't know. I'll call on any of you guys if you remember that meeting when we discussed it previously.
Yeah, I remember it. I'm assuming we'd have to come up with a policy, and people can't just show up.
Well, that would be the hope on this agreement until we get that document. It'd be kind of the same way for use of a field, how we're doing it, or if somebody's renting a pavilion. So we want to be aware when people are looking to go out there, only because we know other people will be watching out. So I don't want to get the call and people are seeing people removing stuff from the pile. I think the kicker of it is if people have to remove it themselves, I don't think you're going to get 25 people who have the ability to be able to remove that kind of earth. So I can't say that it's going to take equipment to do that. I mean, I think we're hopeful maybe we get 1 or 2 requests And then that way the pile's finally gone. But I know Tommy said he has had a request of, and someone's willing to take the whole pile, whether or not that's true, So I think that's the goal, but I also know that the pile's not gonna get smaller. So at some point, I think we should do something. I think, as Carol will attest to, we've managed to, what have we gotten through with the concert as far as our ENS permit or?
We just submitted an ENS permit for stockpiling some riprap over there, and adding refreshing some erosion and sediment controls for the stockpile area. So that's actually in front of the Conservation District for review right now. If somebody wants to take fill now, they're gonna have to do it on days when Dolly isn't working out there. So we're taking a little coordination, but I think this is a win-win for the township to lose some of that material, because that pile does just keep growing every time the public works folks clean out roadside ditches. So, we originally had a purpose for the pile, the purpose is gone, and anything that helps the township get rid of it is a bonus. If that whole harmless can be drafted and provided, it sounds like some of that pile can start disappearing quickly if it suits the board.
Sounds like a plan.
Well, hold harmless is a nice notion, but let's say, I understand some of that dirt originally, or some of that material originally came from the railroad track beds, and we don't even know what that was composed of, and somebody goes and pours it on, at one point in time there was talk about using it as the fill that they would use for that house that was removed and demolished, and there's toxic material in there. We can have a hold harmless, but I bet you they're still going to come after us. I personally have some real trepidations about turning into a fill provider. I mean, that's not really the township's job. I'd be more than willing, I'd like to hear what other people think, but it's a little bit, you don't know what people, you don't know where people are going to use this material. You can't tell me the origin of all the material, and you can't tell me what it's comprised of entirely. If something goes wrong, people go for the deepest pockets or all the pockets they can find. So I have some serious reservations about this concept.
Dan, this is Chuck. I understand what your concerns are, I guess, regardless of how we get rid of the fill, whether we sell it to somebody or that concern is going to be there all the time, right? Wherever that fill goes, somebody could be using it. It could be passed through two sets of hands. They still come back to us. So I understand the concern. I don't see any way to get rid of the fill and say we're not going to be liable for it. Yet we all want to get rid of the fill. So,
well, if you hire, if the fill is removed by hiring a properly licensed facility to receive it, then that risk is mitigated, and then the risk is completely on their hands, I believe. So, yeah, I understand. You're not completely off the hook no matter what we do, but it just, I don't know. I don't particularly like taking risks with the township's funds. But
nobody does. It's a matter of how large the risk is. You feel the risk is personally.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah.
Can any of our professionals speak to these concerns?
Come on, Karen. Let's hear it. I would have to agree with Supervisor Yeiser that if we want to get rid of it, we're going to face these issues. I think, certainly we can write language that I think would, sufficiently protect the township. obviously, no matter what we write, if someone wants to sue us, they're gonna sue us. But, you know, if we have inappropriately written hold harmless indemnification type of language that a person signs as a condition of obtaining this bill, I think that should sufficiently protect us. I think the only thing we can't protect ourselves from is, you know, if there is contamination, EPA or DEP coming after us, but that could also happen if it just stays on our property.
Pete,
So-
just, what you could do is set it up that if somebody comes in, they want X amount of yards, and it's a contractor or another guy who wants dirt, tell them to test it first. All they do is go around, take a couple tests. It does not cost that much money to have dirt tested. If it's not contaminated with anything, then at least they have the test, and we have a copy of it.
I like that.
I mean, that's the way it's done everywhere else. We go in, we gotta move fill from one job to another. We test it, make sure it's good, topsoil and that, and you have the test, it's done. You can move it.
Terry Sachs, that's a very good, I like that suggestion.
It's
I could probably live with that. That would alleviate some of my concerns, because then we have a document that they did the testing, and if anything comes up, it's on them. So I could live with that. Thanks, Terry.
So put it into whatever you wanna draw on, that they have that tested.
I do know from
Yep.
previous experience, it's expensive to move fill. So it would be cost prohibitive for us to try to move it somewhere, especially if that somewhere is not close, or I know Terry could better estimate, but I know it's expensive hauling dirt. So.
Well, if you wanna get rid of dirt right now into these quarries, they're charging $125 a load, just to dump. Then you gotta truck it.
Yeah, the trucking, and yeah, this trucking was 5-6 years ago. This is not.
This is today's
This
time.
is not today's, so, I think that was my thought in agreeing with, let's see if we can do something to get that pile, you know, where we're not really bearing the cost other than, you know, handling the administrative side, which I think that's easier than.
Yeah.
So is the board
Yeah,
okay with that solution?
you won your argument, you're good.
Okay, so is the board okay with that solution?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this will also come up at our next meeting?
Yeah.
To vote on, okay.
I just want to
Yeah.
clarify, there'll be a sign out there, right, telling people that they can't just take it without, you know.
Yeah, that would be part of, I mean, it's, we don't want to, you know, make it self-explanatory, but I think once the board approves the policy, or if the board approves the policy, we've got everything set in place, then yeah, I mean, that's the stuff I think we got to work out is, you know, do we, you know, as part of the policy, do we say from, you know, certain time of day, that kind of thing?
Right.
So at least, you know, maybe it's not on a weekend, maybe it's during a day when, you know, we can kind of do drive or something, you know, to that effect. If, you know, once again, if you don't, you know, it's not like have at it on the weekends when, no township employees are.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
So.
All right,
we
great,
work
good,
that out with the policy.
good.
Okay.
Good solution, okay.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, the authorized use of an HR consultant for non-uniform handbook update and administrative assistant search. I think that's going to be you, Jason.
Okay, so, I know it's been on my to-do list as far as looking into hiring an administrative assistant. I can say after the early 3 months, we certainly have the need. Part of my struggle has just been managing the search, and then follow up with the interviews. I did talk to Roseanne last week. I do believe also that the board may have or may not have talked about updating the non-uniform handbook, which was done in the 90s. I mean, I've gone through it, actually. Was really well done for that time, but things have changed. And I think with Roseanne, who who the board utilized for the manager search. And I think she had expressed to the board at that time, even that the non-uniform handbook needed updating. There's certain sections that need complete overhaul. So she said, while she's busy, she'd be willing to fit us in, and the authorization would be up to 5,000, which she said she'd be able to do the handbook and also help me with the job search, kind of all encompassing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, you know, a couple of the things that are new now is all the social media policy we need.
Yep.
All the harassment policy we need.
Credit
and I'm sure-
credit card use policy, cell phone use,
there's a ton of things,
Yeah, there's
yeah.
a ton of things that I'm aware of that I've done after the fact. So yeah, there's a lot of components to this. And obviously Roseanne being an HR consultant, and hopefully you're satisfied with her work.
Yeah, we're all familiar with her. So any questions or discussion from the board on this? No?
Sounds reasonable.
Yep.
So,
Sounds good.
I'm assuming we'll vote on this next week, or do you want us to vote on this today?
It's up to the board. I wanted to get it out in front. I know I've been asked about the search, so I know you try not to take action, so I think another week won't
Would
hurt us.
recommend to vote on it tonight so we can get it moving?
Okay.
Because I know you need help.
We do.
That'll be
We
one less
definitely do.
thing for next week.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
That's fine with me. So I will craft the motion, and I'm sure someone will nod or shake their head at me if it's incorrect. I move to authorize the use of HR consultant Roseanne McGrath for update of the non-uniform handbook and administrative assistant search, not to exceed $5,000. Is that okay? Oh.
You did it.
Do I have a second?
Chuck Geiser will second.
Oh, there it is, it's right in front of me. All right. So Supervisor Hexter made the motion, Supervisor Geiser made the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Great, so that's one thing you can take off of next week's meeting. Okay. Next item is meeting policy update discussion.
Okay, so I was asked by one of the supervisors who inquired about the time limit that's currently exists to allow for public comment. I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of bring a more comprehensive or full policy for the board to review that will both cover, one policy would cover the Board of Supervisor meetings, and the other one would cover the volunteer board meetings. It's basically stipulates how the meetings are run. It does incorporate, I think, what was the meeting etiquette policy that the board adopted at the end of 2018. I certainly wanted to ask the board about how long we're keeping recordings. Currently, right now, we're recording every meeting, including the volunteer boards. That's not a normal thing. But if there's some reason for that, or and then we're, with the supervisor meetings. So I have been finding those meetings all scattered throughout the server on my computer. So I was looking for direction on whether or not the board would consider reducing that or doing something different with the recordings that we're currently doing that. That was kind of my main things addressing. And then as part of the policy, it did incorporate the legislation that was passed in 2021 regarding the 24-hour notice and how if the board is dead, so it does have that. We're aware of that, but it does put it into our actual meeting policy via resolution, which also makes it easier to find. I took a little bit of digging, finding the policy, because it was done, the policy was adopted just via motion for the policy, so that's why I usually opt to make policies resolutions. It allows us to keep better visibility, and so I know there may be a lot to digest with those, with those two draft documents.
Yeah, just for the public, we adopted a public meeting policy in 2018. I think that was, you were on the board, Terry, and the intent of it was to kind of establish some parameters for the meetings, which many of them are already established in law, which is the right of the public to public comment at certain periods, the expectation of the board that there will be order in the room so we can conduct our business, that people treat each other with respect and don't talk over each other, and things like that. And so I think this is an effort to kind of update that and elaborate on some of those points. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the other key things is to increase the amount of time allowable for a public comment from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. Honestly, most of them go beyond 3 minutes, so we would like to attempt to keep them to 3 minutes. 2 minutes did not seem like enough. Would the board like to discuss this at this time?
So we're discussing the two resolutions, draft resolutions that you
Yes.
prepared for us.
Yeah, they're what I adopted at Springfield last year, so they've been put into use. I tried to adjust them to fit what, how we do things here as far as the agenda and stuff. So it does cover what I kind of a full meeting experience, I guess, so to speak, as far as how the agenda is set up. I don't believe there's any I try to check all the boxes when I create them before, so.
I'm wondering if actually putting in a proposed agenda is useful, because future boards or future managers, or any combination of the two, may make changes. I'm just wondering what the value of this is.
Part of, not so much, probably not so much for the board wise, but certainly for the volunteer boards, it makes their agendas consistent across the board. I mean, actually our volunteer boards, their agendas are I don't have a problem with them as they're done currently, but they're all kind of each to their own, their own way of doing things. So it just makes it more consistent across the board. So that really, whether you're looking at a planning commission agenda or a EAC agenda, they all look similar to actually the board, the board agendas.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's a good time. Yeah. So I'm looking at the first resolution, which is for the Board of Supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure I understand the sentence. And I apologize, I think I scrolled past it quickly. Okay. This is on page 1 at the bottom. It says, "The agenda to be used at any Board of Supervisors meeting shall be determined by the majority of the board present at such meeting, provided, however, that public comment must be included in the agenda prior to any board decisions as it is provided for by law." So I understand the last part, but could you explain the first part to me? What? I think it says at the meeting, at such meeting.
I think this is probably not the best verbiage as I'm
Okay.
looking at it. I think ultimately what it says is that you have an agreed upon agenda by the majority of the board.
Right.
But kind of looking at it now, it doesn't roll off the,
No.
Yeah, because like, I've been to other board meetings in other states, and I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but like, the first thing the board does is they vote to approve the agenda for the evening, and then they move on. I don't know, maybe that's what this is about.
I mean, what I can say is when I drafted I took this from multiple, as I normally do with.
Right.
I do stay in the state because obviously the Commonwealth is different and
Right.
even between second class, first class and boroughs. So, this wording would have come out of whatever document that you would have. So, is that what it is?
So before you could do this, so this verbiage probably is prior to the most recent change in the Sunshine Act. Before those changes, which require a 24-hour prior posting, you could arguably set the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
But now we have to set it at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting, so this sort of language would not work. And arguably, you don't want the board voting or agreeing, making a decision on the agenda outside of a public meeting, because that would be another violation of the Sunshine Act.
Right.
So, I think in theory it works, but in practice it needs to be changed to comply with the Sunshine Act.
Okay.
And following that, item number 2, which refers to the amendment to the Sunshine Act of 2021, and that would be 2A, B, and I guess C, and possibly, well, most of number 2. I'm just wondering, since we may have future amendments to the Sunshine Act, if we ought to have this in a proposed resolution, since it may become out of date in a year or 2 or 3. That's a yes. So should we remove all of number 2?
Yeah,
Maybe just say something like, all meetings shall adhere to the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act, and leave it at that?
Yeah, that's the better way of doing it, because where I see this is a lot of townships in their zoning ordinance have, adopted portions of the MPC, and then 20 years later,
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're
and it
completely out of
changes.
date. This is the same problem. On the other hand, having it in our policy makes it very easy for people to understand, okay, what the rules are. So that's what you have to kind of balance out. This is a policy, not an ordinance, so it's a little easier and a little cheaper to change. So it might make sense to keep it in, keep this verbiage in there.
Okay.
But for us, hopefully, if it ever does change, either we or people sitting in these seats in the future would recognize, oh, we need to update the policy.
And even if we hadn't updated the policy right away, state law would apply,
Absolutely, yes.
and we would have to be in compliance. So,
Yes.
okay, all right, that's fine.
so that's the advantage with the resolution. They're easy to change.
Yep.
Great.
Would it be all right if we give Jason a chance to go back and tweak this guy a little bit and come back to us at a subsequent meeting? Because there's a few things later on that I think are going to be, probably need to be a little bit adjusted as well. So rather than try to rewrite it in conference like this, we'll let Jason perform his magic offline. That's all right. I mean, that's just a suggestion. I'll only sit here and, hash it out too, so.
Yeah, and just for the public, it also addresses things like, asking that cell phones are turned off, that outbursts or insults or intentional disruptions won't be tolerated. Just asking for decorum and respect for the board and for each other in meetings so everybody can listen and we can do our business. Just kind of a lot of common sense things that are just spelled out.
I think one area that we could discuss now, or let Jason go back, but citizen input at meetings, requiring people to come forward to a microphone, similar things that we do now, I guess with our teleconference meetings, to make a decision if people for public comments should be in the room, should be present at the meeting, or how this policy would have to be updated to accommodate that.
So that would be something I would be looking for board, because I believe, don't quote, but I believe some municipalities don't allow for public comment across Zoom land. So while we drafted this in the midst of Zoom here, I don't know that, maybe at the time we thought this was gonna be the norm. So certainly, if the board's interested to clarify that component, I think also whether or not we respond to the chat, you can get into the kind of the bare bones of that as far as the chat and what the board accepts as public comment via remote.
Well, I think, because COVID got dumped on us out of nowhere, I think our manager at the time was just trying to do the best he can to keep meetings going. And, when we saw we had residents who were using the chat feature as their soapbox to run their own meeting in parallel to our meeting, he stopped it. And he basically said, nope, you can send chats to the manager and nobody else.
So I experienced the same thing. My challenge is trying to respond to this stuff while I'm running the meeting. Because we also had something in there that people could email me. I have no mechanism to email me during. So sometimes that's the difficulty of trying to do both things at the same time, and sometimes chat can, plus if somebody's chatting directly to me, that's the thing that's on the screen. So I've been a little apprehensive to kind of get into a back and forth with an individual resident, even though it may be something minor. But that's all stuff that I would like to have board direction as opposed to me saying, no chat. Like this is stuff I'd like to have on paper, so that way it's not me saying it, it's the board has blessed. It's kind of it's why overall I like policies in place that the board has reviewed, discussed.
Personally, if people have business before the board and they can't make it to a meeting, I'm okay with them coming in by Zoom. Otherwise, you do your public comment here. Some people, Phil has in past years, when he hasn't been here, he's sent letters in and asked them to be read.
Yep, that would still be, that all still is in play.
Right.
That would be the normal, that's kind of the carryover.
As far as recordings, I think we should keep, recording the board meetings, our board meetings. I don't see a reason that we should be recording all the other meetings at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree that, people are used to Zoom, and we have people who are elderly or have families, or for whatever reason, they work late, they can't come in. I think having the opportunity to make a comment via Zoom should still be allowed. Otherwise, it could be felt that it is putting an additional hardship on those who either can't or are unable to come in person. But I'd also agree about the chat. The chat's going to be tough. Anything to add?
Not right now at this moment. With
Okay.
I'm still leaning on if a person is on the agenda, having a presentation, has to give a committee report, of course, they can present that on Zoom or submit a letter to the manager prior if there's a comment, but be in the room for public comments. And, of course, listen only mode for everyone else. Keep in touch or keep up with what's going on.
Do you have any comments, Dan, or any questions about this?
I do think we have to be a little bit the Zoom world is upon us. I mean, you had to use Zoom at the most recent Board of Supervisors meeting. I'm using it now because you can't be in two places at one time sometimes. And I think for the reports that come from the committee chairs, I can see occasionally where it might be difficult for them to be here all the time. So I think we have to make certain accommodations. We are in a slightly different world. I think there should be rule. I agree with the idea that we shouldn't be promoting chat. We do need to come up with a set of rules because you can't have a free for all. But promoting the idea of raising the hand if you want somebody's attention in Zoom. Like Mr. Pocus just did 2 minutes ago. It's complicated. I'm going to address the other thing that's out here is about how long do we keep, if we're going to record things, how long do we keep it? I think once the official meeting minutes are produced and approved, I don't think we need to keep it more than any recording more than a month beyond the approval of those minutes. Right now, it's a lot longer than that, which seems to be excessive.
It was made
That's
6
it.
months, because when the people were in here, a lot of people agreed to that 6 months in that meeting, when we did it. We were only gonna do it for 30 days, and when we come up, people were complaining, so we said 6 months, and a lot of people wanted to do that. Because when we put it to all the meetings, is because some of the minutes were not true of what was being written on the paper, from who was taking them. So we verbatim
Perhaps,
by the tape.
Terry? Yep, go ahead.
We went verbatim by the tape. That's why we said the tapes.
Yeah, okay, if we have to make I agree with, I think
And
Jason
the tapes were to be destroyed
Jason was
6
saying
months
that for the
after.
the other meetings beside the board meeting, I think it does. I don't know whether we need to be keeping 6 months. I think there is a real storage issue with the size of these meetings. They all seem to run them much longer than 2 hours. So that's a considerable amount of storage. So maybe we've got to reduce it a little bit in the short term.
Let me just clarify my comment a little bit. I was referring to Zoom. Yeah, I ran probably more meetings than anybody in this room. Yes, we have the portable tape recorder. We've always run that, and I don't think that we should deviate from that. I was not recommending. I'm talking about just Zoom. We ran this. That used to be my job, started in planning commission meetings, run it. I'd leave it for Fern under the window, and Fern would listen to it, or Phil would listen to it, or Fern would ask Phil what we did if something wasn't clear. I'm not suggesting that go away in any way, shape, or form. I'm talking about just the Zoom recordings, as far as which ones we keep. Board meetings, and I was suggesting that all the other meetings that we don't need to be recording those. That was.
Yeah, my reference was to Zoom as well, Chuck. I was referring to Zoom, not the little handheld tape recording device.
Yeah, and another possible compromise or solution to this would be maybe decrease it from 6 months to 4 months, but have a caveat, as long as the minutes have been completed and approved. And that would cover it. If you needed to hold on to them another month or two, then you could, or maybe reduce it to 3 months. With the caveat being as long as the minutes are approved. And would that work for everybody? I'm talking about this tape.
Whatever.
Sure. I mean, that one doesn't seem to be a problem with the 6 months, right, from storage?
Well, it's still something
Okay.
to keep.
So,
That's all.
yeah.
I mean, that's,
As long as it's legal.
And I think the reason why you have so many tapes now is because it was never, the board had never told them to destroy them. They never approved for the 6 months to destroy them. until here just not too long ago.
The 6 months.
The 6 months they should,
That was 18 to 19 is when the 6 months materialized. 'Cause I was-
right, but the reason why you have so many is because they never did destroy them. And they
Well,
should have
right.
been destroyed after 6
Well,
months,
yeah.
but the board never approved to destroy them. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I guess I'm not.
That's why you had them all the way till 2022, 2021.
Okay. I would assume though that if the policy was for 6 months.
Because that's when it was approved to destroy all those tapes, if you look back in the minutes.
I saw them, because I saw them on the document. I guess what I've experienced over my 11-plus years of doing this is that whatever the policy is, I don't need the board. If it says 6 months, then my assumption would be then that's,
That's what it's
so
supposed to be.
it's not coming on like a document, or it's just once you hit that period, since we're not doing them after the minutes are, which is what I've been accustomed to, which is fine. That it's just done at that time frame. So when you hit another month, so I'm fine with whatever the board wants to do. I
Yeah.
really wanted to have the discussion because I wasn't sure, and I hadn't had a chance to have the discussion with the board.
I'm just trying to tell you the way it was set up, you
Right.
know?
So would it be okay to reduce the 6 months to 3 or 4? Again, with the caveat that they can't be destroyed until the minutes are approved, so if for some reason it takes longer, we'll hold on to them longer.
Oh yeah, I would never suggest getting rid of the recording without. I think that's what we ran into. I think that happened to us before during one of the transitions with the minutes getting backed up.
Well, right now, it's 6 months after the minutes are approved.
Oh,
That's our
too
policy,
long. That's too long.
right? I don't know.
I mean, we usually get minutes within 3 months, so I feel like 3 months is sufficient. Anyone else?
It doesn't matter.
I mean, 3 months
I'm
after
okay
the
with leaving
meeting.
it at 6, but
Yeah.
it's fine.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you want to re-ramp it, let's put it together and re-ramp it the way, you want to do it.
Okay. I mean, I've got enough direction to come up with a new draft.
Yeah.
And you guys got time to kind of digest, and we can come up with a consensus and move forward. So,
Okay.
unless the board has anything else they want, or maybe didn't like the language or something that was in front of you, but.
I'll look through it.
Okay. So I'll plan to have this at the next work session.
Okay.
Since I don't have enough time, I don't want to, I obviously have got enough to adjust. I don't want to try to shove it down for next Tuesday, so.
Okay. So next,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think you were first. No, sorry. Go ahead, Warren.
I have a suggestion to solve some of the problems with the recordings. First of all, the recordings that we make here and have the storage problem with are a redundancy because we have a recording from our teleconference provider. How long do they keep that?
It's not, they don't keep it at all. We actually, the
Yeah, we're
recordings
downloading it.
end up on that laptop.
Yeah, they're not being saved on.
We,
on the web.
though,
When you go on to it, they say the meeting's being recorded.
yes, to his laptop.
Oh, not through,
No, our cloud,
not through Zoom.
the cloud storage is very, very chintzy. You can't store much up there.
Okay.
You can pay a lot more and store more, but no, we store it to that gets stored to the device.
So the suggestion that I want to make, because we have a storage issue, to solve another problem too, with transparency. A lot of other municipalities, organizations, churches have YouTube recordings of their meetings.
Mhm.
And I like how Worcester does theirs. They have the camera far enough back that you can see everybody. Everything's clear, perfect on it. then you have it stored forever, and you can just put a link to it, and then Jason won't have to deal with right-to-know requests to get to hear the tapes or anything like that. Everything would be transparent, everybody in the township would be happy. Suggestion.
But they do that for their board meetings.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that for every meeting.
Board meetings is what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
That's what's critical.
Yeah, I agree.
Would the board like me to look into that? I've not experienced that. I don't have YouTube experience, but it can't be all that difficult.
Well, the good
Maybe
news,
talk to Worcester Township, because they do a really good job of it.
I mean,
And there's a disclaimer, if you go on their website, it says, the official,
yeah, I understand.
recording isn't the official meeting, it's the minutes. But it's right there, you can see it, you can see it archived.
I know from personal experience when I have uploaded like hour-long Zoom recordings for adult education purposes, when I've volunteered some of my time. Depending upon how finicky Google is, sometimes it could take an hour or more to transfer it. It sits there at like 95% forever, so.
Well, YouTube's right there.
No, I'm saying he would have to transfer the file from his computer up to Google to post it on YouTube. That's what I do. So I have a meeting recording, which is a file which can be several gigabytes in size. And then when you have your YouTube account, you have to upload that to Google. And all I'm saying is there are times where when I have done that for like an hour-long meeting, it could take an hour or so for it to finish the transfer, and I don't know what it's doing.
Well, maybe we should check into
so-
it. I know one of the local churches that does that.
Yeah.
They have Zoom and YouTube, and the YouTube is live during the sermon.
Right, yeah, I think there may be ways to do that, yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's a serious objection to your idea. I think logistically, we would have to figure out how to make this happen, how much time it would take, and if we have the staff at this time to do that. But perhaps when we get our new admin person, there'll be more flexibility to have someone focus on that. So I guess what we can say is we'll be considering it and look into what the requirements would be and how we would do it. Is that fair to the board?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah? Okay. Bob? Oh,
That's fine.
okay, go ahead.
I second Warren's opinion.
Sorry, can you
Yeah,
come to
sure,
the,
sure.
I mean, we can hear you, but the folks on Zoom can't without the
For
microphone.
297 Smith Road, I'll come up at the end to make my comment. But I agree with what Warren's saying. I believe, a simple solution here is to invest into the cloud and find a cloud provider. They're cheap enough, and you can definitely put in an investment to do that. To Warren's point, you will never have to worry about any type of, deletion of video. You can have an archive for many years to come. It's definitely the way to move forward with this position, move forward with your meetings. And I agree with your admin. I think your admin should be running probably your Zoom chat. I don't think there's a reason why you need to have your chat disappear, right?
At the meetings, I'm the admin.
You are right now. I'm saying if you're bringing on another admin, I mean,
We're not,
at a desk.
I don't think the board's interested in having somebody.
I'm just saying that, we usually, there can be a moderator that you can have. Again, it's moving forward for like future purposes, having, I do this for a global consulting company, right? We have people that monitor chat, we have people that take meeting minutes, that they kind of run that. So it's just a suggestion, just to consider. I get it, there's overhead that's associated to this, but it's just something that if you want to have the up and allow people that can't attend to have a voice, they can at least have someone recognize that they are, having the conversation via the chat, or if they want to come off the microphone and speak, at least have someone, monitoring that. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Bob Burns, Eagleville Road. So in the past 6 months or longer, we've had several residents ask the board if the Zoom recording could be shared to the webpage or the Facebook page the following day after it's already on the laptop. So in the last 2 weeks, I've been out getting my nomination petition done along with some other petitions, and not ready to hand it in today, but there's 32 signatures here from our residents that would like to have the Zoom meeting put on either the Facebook or, I mean, as Warren says, YouTube, whatever, or if it's our webpage. But there's overwhelming, people here that want to have the transparency, that want to be able to go back, that, maybe they heard you say something, or they heard somebody in the audience say something, and they thought about it the next day, and they want to go back and look at it. And it doesn't always work with the minutes. So I can give you an example. A couple of meetings ago, Chuck, I don't know exactly what you said, so if you could clarify, you had brought up something about Simmons Road and a well being drilled, possibly by Schwenksville Water Authority. I've never heard anything about that before.
Right.
Don't know if I heard it wrong when you said it, but had that been available, I could have gone to that. Now, when Mark was here, in order to get a Zoom meeting, he had to put it on a thumb drive, cost $2.50, took 7 to 10 days. If the file is small enough, obviously when they get to these 3-hour meetings, it takes a lot longer. So when the files were small enough, he could just email it to me. But, if we already have if it's recording to that laptop and that device, here again, don't talk to me about technology. The gentleman down there basically just said it all.
Yeah, so you all said the same thing, and we have said that we will definitely look into this, but at this time, it's not as easy as that because we have limited staff and it is logistically time-consuming to do this. So this is something we will look to do in the near future when we have more staff. We don't want to take our manager offline for half an hour or an hour to be uploading a Zoom recording. It's not really a good use of his time. So when we are able to determine how we can do this, and hopefully when we get our new admin person, we'll have additional support. So we're not saying no, we're just saying not tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just
Okay.
saying to you that there's 32 residents that have already signed
Thank
the
you.
petition. There'll be obviously more by the time I turn it in.
Thank you. But again, we have agreed to look into this, so I think we're good. All right, next item, fee schedule draft. How much detail do you want to get in? Do you want to start on this today, finish this today? Do you want to give us highlights of what we should focus on? How do you want to proceed on this?
So as I think all involved, this has been kind of quite the saga. Having Brian, our building inspector, Carol, Peter, and it's been a culmination, I think, of years of discussion.
Yeah.
How I had Brian, as the board can see, you can see the changes and then the answers to questions that Peter had posted, either answered by myself, Brian, Carol. I think some of the things we had in our fee schedule is and then straight out of our code. There is a lot to look at. My main thing was we are as close as we've been to actually having an updated document. Because I got it out yesterday, if the board would certainly like more time, because there is a lot to digest, I certainly wouldn't be opposed. Honestly, I'm just kind of excited that we're as close as we are, because it's been interesting trying to piece it all together. And I had my oh shucks moment last week when I realized how many questions Peter had and I hadn't gotten the answers to. So Brian turned that around really quick for me. I don't want to rush this. The ultimate goal is to have a document that we're not going back at and going, this was a miss, so, I certainly, and looking at the, where we're at time-wise tonight, if the board would like to, wait for even, if you want to put it on next week's agenda, or if you, if you want to wait another month.
Supervisor Worf would definitely appreciate more time. Because, like you said, it just showed up the day before yesterday, and there's a lot to absorb.
So I guess it's just a matter of whether you want to discuss it next week at the general meeting, or put it out to the end of March, and that way, allow the board more time to maybe have its own questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does our agenda look like for next week? How packed is it? Okay.
If it takes that long to count, it must be pretty
We don't
packed.
have many discussion. It's payment requests. There's not a lot. There's no, we're not looking at an ordinance. We're not. So there's not what I would anticipate being long discussion points. I obviously know there's always the potential. So I do believe with what's on the current draft agenda, that the board would have time to talk about it. If we wanted to just take what presented as far as showing the questions, the changes, and kind of go down page by page, or if there's a better way the board might want to.
Yeah.
It would be tough to summarize because there are quite a few changes.
I mean, my only concern is we have the rest of the omnibus to discuss and possibly other things. So, but does the board want to address this next week or push it back to the work session?
No, the omnibus, that's next work.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, if we push this to the next work session,
I see.
it'll be in addition to the rest of the omnibus. So I'm asking the board, they want to do that or try to do it next week?
So I'm fine discussing the majority of it next week. I guess the question is for people who have a chance to go through it, can we offer allow Jason to research some of these items? Would that be okay? Or table everything till next week? I have a few items that.
Yeah, I mean, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them now, yeah.
And it's maybe just
absolutely.
getting an alternate, or an alternative language, or, so it's two areas really. It's alterations and renovations, and we talked about this.
Which number is it?
Sure. 2.
What page is it?
Yeah, so it's on page 2, section 2C, alterations and renovations. So most of our fee schedule is written on type of job or square footage, and there's 2 sections in our fee schedule that's based off of the contract price. I did look at Schwanksville and some other ordinances, and most of them are based on square footage or type of job. So just putting it out there, would this make more sense? And maybe Jason could find some alternative language instead of basing it on first $1,000 of contract and each additional $1,000. Again, not knowing what goes into the inspection of these types of alterations and renovations. Asking Ryan specifically, does it matter if you spent $50,000 on a renovation or $250,000 on a renovation? Is the inspection different? So what's the difference?
And Terry, I would agree on, my experience has been, it's been based on square footage. So I do believe Ryan would adjust to what we prefer to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't want to discourage people from investing in their projects or forcing them to not tell you everything. So page 4, same idea, section 5, mechanical permit fees. Same idea, based off of the contract price. Again, from the inspection side of a mechanical unit inspection, I don't know what the difference would be, and maybe Ryan can provide you some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I could come up with those sections is, this is a like project, this is what it might, is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how much of a difference is it,
Sure.
and are we making it cost prohibitive, like you said,
Yeah.
basing,
And-
contract price over the amount of square footage, which.
And the alterations, renovations, and again, maybe I'm not fully understanding the scope of that, you know, what would fall underneath that, but that does not include your electrical, or your plumbing, your mechanical, that's all in addition to it, so if you're
Okay.
thinking of a renovation, what else is left? Drywall insulation, you know, things like that, so if Ryan comes back and says, leave it that way, we don't wanna lose money in this, but obviously this is not to make money, right? So
Correct.
what's the happy medium here? That's it.
Yeah, yeah, go along with what Terry was saying, there's got to be something better than what you have under 5A3, because you could wind up like each additional $1,000 over $25,000, you're going to hit it. I mean, depending on how egregious your project was, that can turn into a ridiculous amount of money. And like, you know, you don't want to encourage people to misrepresent things, and I think that could have the potential to do that. So I think this needs to be looked at and thought about like the way Terry was just explaining. Is that what you're going for, Terry? Something like that?
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add too is, this is on page 4, the top. We're talking about residential service inspection for electrical permits. And maybe you've already gotten Ryan's feedback on this. But, you know, we charge $75 for essentially a home, right? Not over 200 amp. And then between 200 and 400 amp, $100, over 400 amp, $150. I don't know, I'm not an expert to know how much effort it is to inspect it when you start getting over 200 amps, how much additional effort it is. And if these aren't the right numbers, then we should get the right numbers in there.
Okay. If it's something changed, Ryan didn't weigh in either.
Okay.
He would thought that that what we have is the right fee. But I can further give him, you know, something else to kind of focus on, because that's what I had him do with looking through Peter's questions and being able to get the answers for that stuff.
Intuitively, I would think that, you know, you're starting to get over 400 amps. It's going to be a more complex setup, and you're going to be looking at more things. But I don't know that. I'm not an expert, but it would be good to at least get him to confirm how he feels about the numbers.
Okay. Anything else that's popping out?
No, I think this is really good. I mean, I've gotten, at least that I can think of, 2 permits for some work on my house since I've been here, and the amounts are different that I paid that are in here. So I think having consistency and clarity and transparency is going to be very helpful. So thank you to everyone who worked hard on this. Any other?
Marla, just a reminder, I'm going to drop off in about 2 minutes here.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the board on this? No, so then we will look at this again next week.
Okay.
And that brings us to our last item, Green Lane Master Plan Request.
Okay, so Pam from the Park and Rec Board sent me the information about the Green Lane Master Plan update. She wasn't sure whether the board had discussed or was aware of this. I have not seen any information come through that I'm aware of, because they did know we didn't respond, but I don't know that we've gotten anything over my time here. I attached the County Planning Commission letter along with the schedule and consultants for review. Pam states they're hoping for someone from the township to attend meetings so that municipalities have an active participation. And obviously with Green Lane's close proximity, major project is this, it would be good for the board to have, I figured to at least have the conversation. And I have zero expectations, especially since I haven't talked to anyone direct about the project as far as the schedule is. You do have the schedule. It is, you know, there's certainly a lot of meetings ahead as anyone who's gone through a comprehensive plan. So I don't know if this is something we're interested in or not.
Who do they want to be the township representative? Do they want a supervisor? Do they want a planning commission person? Do they want a park board person, or do they not
It didn't
specify?
specify in the letter. I think they just want someone from the township, probably kind of like the central, where someone's kind of representing the township, I guess, that's either taking notes or bringing back information to the board. I don't know how intensive if this is a full overhaul, or if it's an update, or, so they didn't specify. I think they just wanted a township representative.
Well, I'm looking at this letter, and it's 11, 12, looks like 22 meetings.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yep.
So, I don't know, maybe if someone wants to, I mean, would it make sense for, since Pam brought this to our attention, for a park board member to participate, or do you have any sense of what the right kind of person is?
I have 0 cents on this.
Could we maybe ask Pam to tell us more about this next week?
We could, I mean, like I said, she brought it to our attention, so I'm not sure if even the letter was made out to her, if she has some involvement somehow, or this came from someone else that she knows, but, it's obviously a big commitment. We don't border Green Lane. Certainly we know the water right there can impact us downstream, so I just wanted to pop it up on the board's radar and see if.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the people on the consultant team, and they're landscape architects, environmental service people, park and recreational professionals. I mean, my feeling, and that's just speaking for myself, is if Pam has more information on this, she can share that next week.
Okay.
Any other board members have thoughts on this?
I concur with you, Marla. It's really cryptic as to what they're even planning to do. The information. Yeah.
I'm assuming these meetings are occurring during normal working business hours. It doesn't say in this
Yeah.
letter, but I'm going to assume that's the case, so.
Yeah. And there are a
Or
lot
does
of
it
them.
say that somewhere? Oh, you found another table.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, 9 a.m.,
Okay,
7
yeah.
p.m., 6, yeah, 6:30.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the last page.
They're either at the beginning or the end of the day. Most of them are at the end, most of them are in the evening.
Yeah.
Well, half of them are in the evening. The other half are in the morning, so.
I mean, I don't even know if we take the approach and maybe pick a couple, or something, once again, I just wanted to share the information and for you guys to review and see if there's any direction or you want to give, or
I mean,
just note it and.
I'm okay if we have somebody like Pam who would like to go, and ideally probably an alternate or somebody who, because that's a lot of times and dates. I'm okay with assigning somebody to go and attend
Yeah.
and represent our township and report back. And
no, I agree, and I'm not convinced that any of us are the right people, unless someone wants to do it.
That's why I had 0 expectation. Once again, this was not an ask, this was a share.
Okay. Right, Phil?
he's going to volunteer to be the recording
Phil Smith,
secretary.
205 I just would say that most of the master plans, and I assume this is the county plan, go through a very extensive period of comment once the plan has been drafted, and that's maybe where we ought to be placing, a representative to comment on behalf of the township rather than to serve. Obviously, I guess they'd like the idea that municipalities in the region would participate directly, but I think, if you're looking for a best use of our committee members and, representatives, I think we best serve, once the plan has come to some sort of draft, to come in and add comments that would be pertinent to our position on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on the schedule, I mean, they have public meetings, they have committee meetings, they have executive committee meetings, so, yeah, it's,
So Peter just looked this up, this is a master development plan.
Right.
So it was $200,000 just to create just a draft it. So this is no small, and I think to Phil's, yeah, they'd love to have municipal, I think, comments along the way, but certainly at some point we'll see the draft as we normally would with comp plan updates or drafts that you know we're in the vicinity of.
Yeah, I mean, again, as a couple of us have said, if Pam or someone like Pam wants to go to some of these meetings, we're not going to stand in the way.
So I can feel it out, because obviously
Okay,
if,
yeah.
if they're representing the township, that's something, you know, I would want the board to bless
Yeah.
and be aware of if that's the capacity someone's going to, so.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're, looking at the Gantt chart, their schedule goes out through April of 2024. I mean, we don't, are these like open meetings, meaning that anybody could look in on Zoom or whatever they're using, or, you know?
It's hard to tell. Maybe
We
some
might
of
have
them are,
residents
some
who
of them
just
aren't.
want to watch it because, you know, some of them have to do with, let's say, birding, as I'm reading here, and
Well,
other things.
the
so,
public meetings will be public, but
Yeah.
the other ones maybe not, so.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get more information on that.
Okay.
All right, that brings us to public comment. Go ahead. And please be sure and state your name for the note taker.
Yeah, sure. It's Blake Siv, 297 Smith Road. So last time I came to the board, we were really still kind of nowhere in our process. We were still kind of between the two townships. The good news is we do have some progress in our position,
Yay.
where we do have one township, which will be Lower Frederick, where all of our reviews will go through now, both for permitting as well as stormwater management. A few areas I do just want to address, just in clarification. One is, I believe we still have submitted for a variance that we'll need because of the 2 acres. I was just curious if there was a date for.
So that's been sent to the zoning hearing board, we're working on the date.
Okay.
So they do have that, they met last night, we only had 2 members, well, we had 2 members plus Matt was online, but the solicitor and stuff is we're setting that up now, so.
Okay.
I would, not him, our zoning hearing board solicitor.
Got it. Okay.
So I would expect we should have that within the next couple of days or so.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Appreciate it, Jason. So along those lines, I know, according to the letter, we have to, I believe, reassign our address as the address that has been assigned by Park Yeoman. We'll have to go through Lou Cicciarini for Montgomery County Emergency Dispatch Services and Julia Eltz. I believe they need to provide a new address or reissue our current address, which I'm fine with. I mean, I was just seeing if that's something you're taking care of, Jason, or how does that happen?
I know we work with them as far as addressing. Normally the township would give the address.
Yeah.
Emergency management weighs in, or the emergency services weigh in.
Right.
But that's something the township will be taking care of.
Okay, I just asked that because if we need to submit our plans, do we not need to have the right address on that plan, just as a mirror? Or it doesn't matter?
Address is one
Yeah.
thing, the parcel number, honestly,
Okay.
is the definitive. Sometimes, many times an address doesn't exist with a parcel. I'm not sure how an empty parcel has an address,
Right.
to be honest, because normally that wouldn't happen. It's been my experience, it normally doesn't happen until the building permit's been submitted.
Sure.
I know that in some cases, I believe, residents need, people need an address as part of their loan or something.
Well,
So-
that's true, and that's why I asked, because
Yeah.
if it's not 297, then, what will it be? So just want to make sure that that's getting addressed before.
I appreciate you very, kind of popping that on my
Yeah.
radar.
So, and then the other thing too, which the language here is kind of interesting, it says the Sims will need to select Lower Frederick Township as their taxing authority. So, fine. It's just that it's saying selecting. What does that, and it puts the onus on me to select you, or is that something that between the solicitors that's getting handled? Because I already paid a year's worth of, property taxes in Perkiomen when we settled for the land, right? So, just to add a little more, flavor to this.
That question, you probably should talk to the county tax board of assessment.
Okay,
And
so
Montgomery
I
County.
need to do
Yeah,
this?
you probably
Okay.
need to start that process.
Okay.
And you might have to talk to the two tax collectors for each township. Yeah, that's something that's gonna be on you. Generally speaking, we, the township, set the tax rates. We ultimately get the taxes, but everything is in between is outside of our hands.
Okay, so I can do that now, or is that?
Yeah, I start doing that now.
Yeah.
I start with the county, but be prepared, once the county, if you're gonna try to basically get your tax money back from Perkiomen and get it here, you're gonna have to talk to
Yeah.
the collector.
I guess it's just like, well, what, it's that process, like, do I start paying taxes for Lower Frederick when we move in? I just don't understand the
I don't
time
know
frame
that,
for that.
that's what I'm saying, you can talk
Yeah.
to the county,
Okay,
that's where I would start.
okay, that's really, the last of my questions for the time being. But yeah, I think as far as process, then, once we get through the variance, then it should just be the normal approvals at that.
Yeah, as you tried to do with the other towns.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah, well, that's another, story for another day.
Welcome to Lower Frederick.
Thank you.
I'm already attending meetings and not even a resident.
Well, yeah, you are now. Are we at public we're at public comment now. Go ahead, Bob.
Bob Burns, Inglerville Road. So I'm sure most of you saw the new crosswalk that was put in up in front of the ski resort there, up in Upper Frederick, or Upper Salford. Have you seen that? No?
When you
Okay.
say new, how new?
Well, I guess it's within the last 6 months. They put a new trail system in across the
Yes.
road. They've got signs up on both sides. So
Yeah, I've walked it, yeah.
within the last 2 weeks, the county came out and actually, at our intersection down here, they went and repainted the crosswalk. I've had a lot of residents say to me that they're having issues when they pull up to our stop sign there, that the bikers that are on the trails aren't stopping, and they're coming out into the intersection, and either hitting their vehicles or getting very close to getting hit. So it seems like we need to have somebody from our township contact the county and get them to update whatever needs to be updated, because honestly, our crosswalk has nothing compared to the crosswalk that they just put in. We have no signage whatsoever, no advance warning, no nothing. All we have is the painted crosswalk from the trail that goes from one side to the other. So, it's something that the county should be taking care of 100%. It's just, who do we have, whether it's Jason is the liaison, or it's Tommy, or Carol, or John when he's here. Somebody just needs to get to the county and say, hey, you might need to take a look at this and update things.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? That looks like a no. Do we have a hand up?
No hands up.
What's-
It's just the mouse. That's the mouse.
Oh,
That's his
okay, it looks
pointer
like a
thing,
yellow
yeah.
something. Any supervisors care to make any comments about anything?
Not tonight. No, I don't.
Nope. Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and travel safely.
Recording stopped.
Looks like a yellow. oh, that's the-
Yeah, I